Grenade.
Well, what happens when the justice system collapses because there's so much crime, overpopulation, and social decay? I think the answer is Megacity-One. It's a place where judges who are law enforcers become jury, judge, and eventually executioner. Ever since the comic's debut in 1977, the series has been famous for its sharp and dark setting, where characters like Judge Dredd trample all sanity in the name of justice. In this tale today, I bring you 5 of the darkest stories set in the world of Judge Dredd.
Rapid fire.
The day life itself became a crime, Judge Dredd's first crossing. Among the myriad of monsters emerging from Judge Dredd lore, none is as unsettling as Judge Dredd. Okay, to be fair, Judge Dredd was psychotic even before becoming the terrifying persona that he is, but to him, his first crossing to Megacity-One was more for his twisted sense of justice than true revenge. So you could say Judge Dredd doesn't think he's evil, he thinks he's right. The story begins with a criminal trying to escape the clutches of the judges, when he encounters a skeletal figure dressed like one of the judges. Apparently this is Judge Dredd, and he kills the man to deliver the ultimate judgment. Later, when Judge Dredd and the others find the body, he realized that the skin fragment left on the dead man belonged to someone who had been dead for centuries. What a strange supernatural case, you would think. As Judge Dredd goes into a club to issue his judgment of death, he comes face to face with Judge Dredd and his gang. But when they tried to stop him, they realized they couldn't kill something that's already dead. So how do you actually contain such a thing? Judge Anderson realized the answer to this question lies in binding the spirit rather than trying to kill the dead terror. Originally, Judge Dredd is from a parallel world, but he comes to Megacity-One in order to extract justice. Personally, I find it very terrifying, since he starts murdering indiscriminately, but not out of sheer hatred or anger, but out of justice. To him, if the living are capable of committing crimes, then the only way to achieve perfect justice is to eliminate all life itself. With the Sisters of Death's help, he saw that he could fulfill his goal of exterminating all life to serve true justice. In his Dredd world, Judge Dredd ran rampant, killing, and once he was done, he crossed into Megacity-One. After crossing into this Megacity-One world, he raises hell so potently that even the judges find it hard to deal with. However, Judge Anderson turned out to be Death's mortal enemy. Yeah, I put a little pun in here of Death having a mortal nemesis. Since crossing here, Judge Dredd had faced Dredd and got backlash, but even without a body, his spirit thrived as a disembodied spirit. In a bid for containing Judge Dredd, Anderson makes the ultimate sacrifice. She traps Death's spirit in her body by putting herself in a self-induced coma. While this seemed like the perfect solution, what it did was only delay the inevitable. Once Anderson trapped Death, she was placed in a plastic Boing, a miracle plastic from Dredd lore, in order to preserve her forever. However, eventually, it didn't end up doing what it was supposed to. In Judge Dredd Lives, the mythos around Death expanded, and it was saying that he did not exist alone, but as a group, containing Judge Fear, Judge Mortis, and Judge Fire. They crossed dimensions for their leader, and together they managed to create a lot of chaos before Judge Dredd and Judge Anderson once again managed to send them spiraling into the dead world. Do we think Judge Dredd was justified in his vision? Probably not. He was terrifying to say the least, but not because he was willing to murder people, but because he thought he was delivering justice. His twisted sense of law and order turned out to be the most unlawful thing, since he was ready to massacre millions for his vision. 400 million dead, and Dredd pulled the trigger too, the Apocalypse War. What happens when the protagonist thinks that only a mass massacre is the only lawful option? I think it would clearly mean a dark turn. It's a deadly bait when genocide is seen as legal just because it has a so-called lawful backing. Here, whatever Dredd did, he did not break the law. He was the law. This arc deals with the Sovs of East Meg-1, where Master Spy Orlok the Assassin poisons MC-1's water supply with Block Mania virus. Well, what does the virus do? Strangely enough, it makes the residents loyal to their own block, but hostile towards others. This naturally means a breaking out of block wars, which overwhelms the judges. Meanwhile, as the city was descending into chaos, the Sovs launched their own attack. This invasion was deadly, including nuclear bombing and missile attacks. As with any widespread destruction, MC-1 took a major hit when the Sovs launched the nuclear attacks. Before the chaos began, the population of the city was 800 million. However, the nuclear strikes, the radiation, and the subsequent starvation reduced the population to nearly 400 million. Now, this is a turning point in the narration, because with so many dead, Judge Dredd does not think it's important to negotiate or look into ceasefire situations with the Sobs. He simply wants to pull the trigger now. He tries conventional methods first, with attacks aimed to shake the Sobs, like with raiding supply lines to slow the enemy. But he soon realizes he needs to do something really out of the box. First, there's the case of Chief Judge Griffin, who was taken over by the Sobs. Here, Dredd actually shoots the guy before he can reveal any secrets or demoralize the public on behalf of the Sobs. Then comes the ultimate drastic measure, the destruction of East Meg-1. Along with Judge Anderson and Judge Hershey, Dredd takes charge of the Soviet nuclear arsenal. He launches it, annihilating the entire East Meg-1 in one go, and killing hundreds of millions, effectively erasing the Soviet megacity from the map. A genocide is still a genocide when you do it to stop a war, right? But apparently here, in 2000 AD, it was deemed necessary and lawful. After the counterstrike, Dredd surrenders and is captured by the War Marshal Kazan. But eventually, he's free, with Kazan overthrown and executed. And apparently, the threat is done and dusted. But what exactly is justice here? In this arc, every atrocity is committed under the authority of law. Thus, this is a very dark turn in the comic series, since the story deliberately exposes the contradictions of the judge system. Legality and morality are not one and the same, but here, Dredd's actions are justified as lawful, which is a satirical critique, because it's not breaking the law when you are yourself making the law. Scary, right? Democracy is the crime, America. It's sometimes the democracy that comes crashing down on people. This arc shifts the tone of the comics towards the regular people of Megacity-One, who are living under the authoritarian system of the Justice Department. Narrated as a story by one of the characters, Bennett Beanie, the tale follows the ambitious girl America Jara. She's dissatisfied with the Justice Department and the way they handle things. To her, it's no less than a dictatorship that tramples on people's freedom and democracy. Bennett loves her, but she's more in love with the idea of freedom, so she rejects him when he confesses and goes off. While she meets another man named Duty, Bennett becomes rich and popular as a singer. Years later, the two cross paths again, with America being a radicalized rebel and Bennett a wealthy man. America is part of a terrorist cell, and before they can properly reunite, their group kills two of the judges, and one of her teammates also injures Bennett in the process. Fortunately, Bennett survives, but loses his singing voice. Out of sympathy, America starts to visit Bennett in the hospital, and it's there that we come to know how America became who she is. America Jara once tried the peaceful way of opposing the Justice Department. She tried the normal way once, but was so thoroughly destroyed by those who were supposed to protect them that she turned to radicalization. Years ago, she participated in a peaceful protest rally with her boyfriend, Duty. The plan was to peacefully walk in a pro-democracy march, but undercover judges instigated violence. The fiasco erupted, and it ended up killing Duty, while she herself was critically injured. She even lost something precious to her, and the experience leaves her consumed by hatred towards the system. Eventually, she joins the extremist pro-democracy group Total War. In the present, she shares her plan with Bennett to destroy the Statue of Liberty, because liberty has ceased to exist properly within the justice system. In this authoritarian rule, the destruction of the statue would be an appropriate message to the judges. She asks Bennett to invest in her plan, and reluctantly, he agrees on the condition that no one is killed in the process. But conscience is a bitter thing, and it drags Bennett into secretly informing Judge Dredd about the radicals' plan. However, he did extract the promise that the woman he loved would not be harmed. Things, though, don't always go as planned. When the judges thwart the terrorists, they open fire indiscriminately. While America survives the initial attacks, eventually she's shot in the head and is left brain dead. But the horror for her, or Bennett, doesn't end there. The arc tells us one important thing. When control is so indulgent, it breeds fear and resentment. In this story, the horror is not invading monsters or supernatural entities. It's simply the rigid rule of the Justice Department. America is destroyed by a system that doesn't need to hate her. It only needs to process her. She's not a threat or a malfunctioning cog in the system, but something that becomes an end to the means. Truly, the scary part is that Judge Dredd's not doing something evil, but simply carrying out his duty, which leaves a bitter taste in my mind. I mean, how easy is it to see Dredd as an honest man and at the same time a product of authoritarian rule? In the continuation of the Bennett America storyline in later issues, like America 2, Bennett is still mulling over his decision to betray the woman he loves and has to live with the consequences that come with it. Later, we get to see how life is for him after Bennett survives by having his brain transplanted into America's body, then gives birth to their daughter, America Beanie, using sperm he had stored earlier. It's crazy stuff, I'll tell you. Megacity-One Under the Dead, Necropolis. Death is a haunting proposition, but what happens when the entirety of MC1 becomes a slaughterhouse under the judges from the Dead world? After the events following the Dead Man and the Tale of the Dead Man, Judge Dredd leaves the city. Surprisingly, he left the Justice Department, stating how corrupt it had become. In his absence, a clone of him, Judge Kraken, assumes Dredd's identity and wears his badge. It's not fair, is it? The Justice Department wanted to hide the truth about Dredd leaving, and thus installed someone who is chronically unstable and psychologically burnt out. This made him a perfect clone, not only for the Justice Department, but also for manipulation by the Sisters of Death. They easily took control of him, turning Kraken into a conduit for unleashing a mass destruction of MC1. The priestesses from the Dead world, Phobia and Nausea, enter this parallel world using a human woman as a vessel, but the body proves to be too fragile to sustain them. So naturally they wanted a new vessel, and Side Judge Kit Agi became that vessel for them. The sisters manipulate Kraken to kidnap Kit, and thus their plan is set into motion. Kit Agi was a gifted person who happened to be a friend of Judge Anderson, so naturally she was the first person to receive warnings about the approaching doom from the Dead world. The Sisters of Death used Kit's psychic powers to create a link of sorts between this parallel world and their own world. In a way, Kit became an unwilling anchor of the doom she wanted to prevent. It's a cruel turn of fates, and it only gets worse for her as she becomes a casualty to eliminate for the other judges. As per the sisters' manipulation, Kraken goes into Tech 21 and releases the Dark Judges from the stasis Judge Anderson put them into years prior. Thus, all four return: Judge Death, Judge Fear, Judge Fire, and Judge Mortis. And once again, they planned to end all life because life itself is a crime. The return of the Dark Judges was followed by pure chaos and mass murder. They attacked other judges too, like Chief Judge Silver, either slaughtering them or driving them to the brink of insanity. The Sisters of Death plunged the entirety of Megacity-One into darkness, like a necropolis. They sentenced every citizen guilty of life, and thus was to be executed. The toll of death went to a horrifying number of 60 million people. While the city descended into chaos, Dredd finally made his journey back here, but the city was not the same one he had left. It had become something so horrifying that he couldn't believe it. With a coalition of the other surviving judges, they launched a counterstrike, killing their conduit Kit and severing their link to this world. After that, it was a direct slope upwards of taking control back and defeating the Dark Judges. After the nightmare was over, the city was nothing more than a mass grave, a cemetery without life. This arc turns out to be a horrifying and dark tale about how even with the absolute law of the Justice Department, evil spreads through minute cracks inside the system, before taking a huge, destructive shape. The Chaos Bug and the city that ate itself, Day of Chaos. They say the past moves in vicious circles, and it always comes to haunt you. In this arc, the genocide of the Apocalypse War comes back to bite the Justice Department. In essence, the plotline of Day of Chaos is entrenched in previous arcs. The first part, The Fourth Faction, reveals the aftermath of the Apocalypse War and what Dredd did back then. The mass murder of the Sov's East Meg 1 had left a bitter taste in the mouths of the survivors. They wanted revenge on Dredd for the indiscriminate destruction of their city. They never forgot the humiliation and thus planned something devastating. Unbeknownst to the Justice Department and Dredd, the survivors of East Meg formed a secret organization called the Fourth Faction. Their goal was not some glorious military conquest, but slow decay and destruction of the city from the inside. They believed that since the conventional way of war had failed them, they needed to target the vulnerable population in some other way. In short, by creating a biological weapon. This came to be known as the Chaos Bug. However, it wasn't a normal disease-inducing bug. So I think you can easily understand how their plan and their determination is a direct consequence of Dredd's actions back then. The victims of the Chaos Bug attacked one another, committed suicide, or caused widespread destruction. Naturally, with such catastrophic effects, the bug spread through the city at an alarming rate, shocking the judges. The city was collapsing within itself instead of being subjected to mass destruction from outside. The citizens were killing each other, and riots were becoming a daily occurrence. Even the judges were affected by the bug. But instead of coming to a solution that could save everybody, Chief Judge Francisco realized that MC1 couldn't be unanimously saved. So safe zones were set up where unaffected people were quarantined, while the infected people were left to face their fates. Eventually, Judge Dredd managed to cut off the surviving East Meg 1 rebels and ended their operation. But it came way too late. The city had already descended into chaos and almost 350 million people were dead. The population decreased by 87%, making this arc one of the most horrifying and dark tales in this 2080 universe. The city survived, but just barely. The cost was too great: shattered economy, refugee influx, and various abandoned sectors. But I think the most striking consequences of this arc is how the Justice Department itself became very vulnerable in the aftermath. However, it survived throughout the arc, and at the end, Francisco resigned, and Barbara Hershey returned to being the chief judge. Unfortunately for Dredd, Megacity-One was never the same, permanently affecting him and dawning a new era for him. With this, we come to the end of our list today. I think you'll all understand why these specific arcs were chosen to be the darkest tales. The idea that destruction is a twofold process of internal chaos and external elements is striking here. America and Apocalypse War showcase how even the Justice Department is responsible for the chaos the city has to endure. Meanwhile, stories of Judge Death and his twisted sense of justice show the dark nature of our minds. But the Chaos Bug story is nothing but a reminder that if you don't handle things wisely, they'll surely come back to bite you. Now, if you like this tale, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, ring that notification bell so that when we come up with more Judge Dredd content, you don't miss out. Stay safe, make sure you obey the law.